Hello, great people. A Nigerian king of Yoruba extraction have been sentenced to 5 years imprisonment in the United States. The king committed fraud and now he has backed 5 years imprisonment. On this episode of Politics with Joshua Plug, I want to take you on a journey into the corrupt lifestyle of the king, the fraud that he committed, how he was tried, and how he eventually landed in U.S. prison. I will be taking you on that journey, and also we'll be looking at the leadership recruitment process in Nigeria and some of the characters of Nigerian leaders, particularly their source of wealth, especially those that have lived in the diaspora before. We'll be doing all this and more on this episode of Politics with Joshua Plug, Dr. Oba Joseph Oloyede. I must tell you that if you are watching me right now, make sure you watch this video to the end because I'm about to take you on a journey that you will find very interesting. You will recall that there was a time there was COVID-19 pandemic, and during that time there is a man called Joseph Oloyede who eventually became a king, and Joseph Oloyede became the Apetu of Ipetumodu in Osun State. He is currently the Apetu of Ipetumodu in Osun State. Joseph Oloyede was in the United States at that point in time, and he used fake companies to receive benefits that are meant for the citizen of the United States. You will recall that when the pandemic broke out, the United States was very disturbed at that point in time, and unlike the Nigerian government that doesn't care for its citizens, countries like the United States, the UK, France, they were committed to the welfare of their citizens. So they distributed palliative and stipend and maybe some financial disbursement to make sure that people do not suffer and business does not collapse. So during the rush of the COVID-19 pandemic, the United States government were just distributing funds. If you apply for it, that you want to use it to save your business or you need something, the US will just give it to you. So the king at that point, he wasn't the king at that point. Joseph Oloyede, before he became king, he now used fake companies to acquire funds from the United States. And after the pandemic, the United States government conducted a thorough review of how much was distributed, of who gets what, when, and how during the pandemic. And the United States government began to realize that there was monumental fraud that was committed, that some people took advantage, some people took leverage of the generosity of the US government to be perpetuating fraud. So they now began to investigate them, and one of such person, unfortunately, is Joseph Oloyede. Is not the only one. There were a number of Nigerians that took advantage of that opportunity. You know, some Nigerians usually believe that, oh, now we get sense pass, you know, that kind of a thing. So they committed the fraud. And in May 2024, Joseph Oloyede was arrested. He was arrested. He didn't know that the US government were looking for him. So he traveled to the United States. After he had become king, he traveled to the United States to maybe tidy one or two things. And he was picked up at the airport. And when he was picked up, then his case began. Joseph Oloyede is 62 years old. He's currently 62 years old. Now, let me read to you his offense as charged by the US government. The U.S. government asserts that Joseph Oloyede, the king of the Apetu of Ipetumodu in Osun State, the current king, his offense is that he used 6 companies to fraudulently obtain loans under the U.S. Paycheck Protection Program and Economic Injury Disaster Loan Schemes, both emergency relief packages rolled out during the coronavirus pandemic. That is his offense according to the US government. Now let me read to you the sentence that was handed down to Joseph Oloyede. The judge ruled that Mr. Oloyede should be sentenced to 56 months imprisonment on each of count 1 and count 13 of the indictment, and 36 months on count 1 and 2 of the supplemental information. All items will run concurrently according to court document. In addition to the custodial terms, the monarch will serve 3 years of supervised release, pay a mandatory $400 special assessment, and forfeit asset links to the fraud. But that is not the only thing. You know, he has received sentence now that cumulatively amounts to about 5 years. But then, after Oloyede pleaded guilty, maybe perhaps because he pleaded guilty, that's why his sentence was 5 years. Maybe it would have been more than that. But then, there's something that I find shocking, which is that the court ordered Oloyede to repay $4.4 million US. Oloyede was ordered by the US court, apart from the 5-year imprisonment, that he should go and repay $4.4 million. So that means that after he has served the 5-year term and is released, before he can be free, before he can be a free man, he needs to pay back $4.4 million. The big question is that for an offense that was committed in 2020, Oloyede would have been living extravagantly. In fact, maybe it is part of that money that he used to pursue his kingship ambition in Osun State. So maybe it is part of that money. If it is part of that money and he has spent lavishly to get to that throne, he has done this coronation ceremony, he has bought some nice jeep, maybe some Rolls Royce or something in his garage in Nigeria, just to show off that he's a king of repute and influence. If he has spent lavishly, the big question is, how will he retrieve the $4.4 million to send back to the people? So the big question is that if Oloyede is unable to refund that particular money, what will happen? Because apparently, I don't see him being able to refund the $4.4 million. So if he serves his jail time of 5 years and is now unable to refund that particular money, the big question on my mind is, what will now happen to him if he's unable to refund that particular money? And you know that right now it's difficult for him to appeal, even if he changes his mind, because he has already pleaded guilty. So now I think that Oloyede is in a big trouble. Because he would have used the 4.4 million to oppress and live large in Nigeria. In fact, he must have used maybe some of the money to snatch people's wives, to collect people's land, build big houses and magnificent structure. But one thing that is of concern to me and should be of concern to you is the consistent pattern of foreign indictment among Nigerian leaders. There seems to be a consistent pattern of foreign indictment. And I will give you examples in that regard. The current president, Bola Ahmed Tinubu, was indicted for drug dealings in the United States, so much so that he forfeited about $463,000 to the US government at that point in time. Not only the president, Senator Neda Imasuen, the chairman of the Senate Ethics Committee that sat on the case of Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan and recommended suspension for 6 months, Senator Neda Imasuen, the chairman of that committee, was also indicted for fraud in the United States, and he ran back to Nigeria. Now the United States government is currently looking for him to come and account for his fraud. In fact, his accomplice in that particular case has been sentenced. That one is in prison now, cooling in prison. But Neda Imasuen is a senator in Nigeria. You can see the sharp contrast. Somebody that committed fraud in the United States is in prison. Another person is a senator in Nigeria. So instead of the Nigerian government to work with the US government to repatriate Neda Imasuen, what do we have? You find a situation whereby it will even be the Nigerian government that will be protecting him. But if it is all these small Yahoo boys, if it is the likes of people that are not influential in government circle like Hush Puppy, government will be swift to repatriate them. So you can see that there's actually no rule of law, equality before the law in Nigeria. Another person is Femi Gbajabiamila, the chief of staff to the president. You will recall that when Femi Gbajabiamila was struggling to become the Speaker of the House of Representatives during the Buhari time, Femi Gbajabiamila, there was this document in the public space that he has been indicted for fraud allegedly in the United States. So now you can see leaders in sensitive positions in Nigeria, they either have one fraud case or one issue or the other, particularly in the United States and some of these Western countries. Another instance is Dapo Abiodun, the governor of Osun State. He allegedly has a case in, I think, the United States because it made the rounds at one particular time, particularly during the electioneering period. Another one is the late Buruji Kashamu, who also tried to be the governor of Osun State, but he is late now. So you can see this pattern, this consistent pattern of indictment among foreign leaders. Another one is the chairman of Air Peace, Allen Onyama. Allen Onyama was reported to have committed fraud in the United States allegedly, and the United States government is looking for him to come and account for his alleged actions. So you can see that across ethnic divide, there's this pattern of foreign indictment among Nigerian leaders, and that leaves much to be desired. Now let us go back to the home front in terms of the legal system of Nigeria. You see, if it were to be Nigeria, this King Joseph Oloyede may have been freed by the court. In fact, the probability that he would have been freed is very, very high. But then, the United States is not a respecter of kings or big men. You commit any crime, you go down for it. And that is one thing that we need to copy in Nigeria. We need to erase this pattern of selective justice, because selective justice is so common in Nigeria. If you are a poor man, if you mistakenly steal a goat, you are going down. But if you are a rich man, even if you steal the whole community, if you steal the whole government, even if you steal the whole Abuja or the national cake, as Nyesom Wike is allegedly doing as regards Abuja lands, definitely at the end of the day, nothing may happen to you. And to add to the list of foreign indictment, Nyesom Wike was recently accused of purchasing a home in Florida, United States, that amounts to over $2 million US. So you can see the consistent pattern of foreign indictment among Nigerian leaders. So it is sad that this fraud are being committed home and abroad, and they are being held accountable abroad, but little or no accountability is we are seeing little or no accountability in Nigeria. If it were to be in Nigeria, you see that King Joseph Oloyede may even be given a national honor. If he's a friend to the president, if he's a close ally to the vice president, or he's close to the wife of the president or the son of the president, he may even be given a national honor. So if we want to progress as a country, then we need to begin to take all these things seriously. Then they used to say, respect your leaders, respect your leaders. With all sincerity, are these the kind of leaders that we will respect? And you may want to imagine that in the olden days, it is the oracle that select kings. But now, most of the kings we have are political obas. They are political kings, political emir, political Ezes. Because I don't want to think that, the Ifa oracle in Yoruba land will select a fraudster to become the king of a community. I don't want to think that the oracle will do that. So you can see the handwork of politicians in terms of all these political obas. As we have them, we have political Ezes, political emirs. And I think that the right time, maybe we return back to the oracle to be selecting the kings and abiding by the dictate of such oracle. I think the best for all of us. But then, how do we respect this kind of a king when they say, oh, respect your elders? Well, it's been an interesting time with you. Subscribe, turn on your notification button, catch up with my past videos. See you in my next video. I love you all sincerely.